5,000 sailors stood frozen under a California sun that turned asphalt into a griddle. Not one of them moved. Admiral Thorne stood over the woman he had just struck, his hands still raised, his voice cutting across the silence.
Dead weight. You are everything wrong with this uniform.
She did not fall. She did not react. Blood traced a thin line from her lip as she slowly straightened her spine, squared her shoulders, and brought her eyes forward. One junior officer in the front formation went pale. He recognized the way she absorbed the hit, not like a victim, like someone who had taken far worse and kept moving. Her left hand hung perfectly still at her side. Her breathing never changed.
Permission to retrieve my personnel file, sir.
Thorne laughed. The formation did not. Because one officer had just started searching a name he could not fully place, and what appeared on his screen made his face go white.
From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story already has your full attention, please consider subscribing, because what that sealed folder revealed in the next 10 minutes ended a career, silenced 5,000 witnesses, and uncovered a sacrifice that was never supposed to see daylight.
The digital clock read 4:47. No alarm had sounded. Bryony Hale was already awake. She rose in darkness, movements economical and precise. The bachelor quarters were silent except for the distant hum of ventilation systems and the muffled footfalls of early morning watch changes echoing through the corridor outside. She moved through her routine without hesitation, each action measured to the second. Hands reached for the bandage roll on her footlocker. She wrapped her left ear with practiced care, fingers, pausing at a specific point where scar tissue disrupted the natural curve. The process took 43 seconds. She had timed it often enough to know. The shower ran cold for the first 30 seconds. She stood under the stream without flinching, letting the water trace patterns across her shoulders and down the vertical scar along her spine. When steam finally filled the small bathroom, she washed methodically. Shampoo, rinse, repeat, soap applied in sections. The routine never varied. Predictability was control. She dressed in her logistics corps uniform, movements sharp and deliberate. The fabric settled across her frame with military precision. Her fingers worked the buttons without looking, muscle memory guiding each motion. She checked her reflection only once. The face staring back was unremarkable. Early 30s, no makeup. Hair pulled into a regulation bun, tight enough to last 12 hours. The bandage around her left ear was barely visible beneath the edge of her cover. 3 objects sat on her footlocker. She studied them in the pre-dawn dimness. A brass compass, tarnished along the edges. The initials that had once been engraved on its face had been filed away, leaving only faint scratches where letters used to be. She turned it over. A date was etched into the back. Halo, 7/14. March 21. The metal felt cold against her palm. A sealed manila envelope lay beside the compass. Multiple forwarding stamps covered its surface, each one documenting a journey through military postal systems. The final stamp was dated 6 months prior. She had never opened it. The paper had yellowed slightly at the corners. An old dive watch rested at the bottom of a thick wool sock. Expensive, tactical grade, the kind of timepiece that could withstand depths most people would never see. She kept it hidden, wrapped carefully so the metal wouldn't click against the footlocker when she moved it. She touched the compass. Her fingers traced the filed-down surface where initials used to be. She did not open the envelope. She did not retrieve the watch. After 30 seconds, she closed the footlocker and secured the combination lock. The dial spun with 3 sharp clicks. Dawn broke over Naval Air Station Coronado as she stepped outside. The air tasted of salt and jet fuel. Morning mist clung to the asphalt, diffusing the floodlights that illuminated the pathways between buildings. In the distance, helicopters moved across the sky like dark insects against the brightening horizon. Their rotors created a rhythmic thump that carried across the base. She walked alone. Other personnel moved in groups, their voices carrying through the morning stillness. Bryony kept her distance, her path taking her along the edge of the main thoroughfare, rather than through the center. She moved with purpose but without hurry. Her eyes tracked everything. Exits, security cameras, patrol patterns, the direction of the wind. Details most people never noticed. The mess hall smelled of coffee and industrial-grade scrambled eggs. She filled her tray with practiced efficiency. Oatmeal, banana, black coffee, no sugar. She carried it to a corner table near the emergency exit, the same table she occupied every morning. From this position, she could see both entrances and most of the room. Old habits. She ate methodically. Oatmeal first. Banana sliced into precise sections. Coffee consumed in measured sips between bites. Her eyes never stopped moving. She watched the flow of personnel, noting clusters and patterns. A group of SEALs sat 3 tables over, their conversation loud and confident. They wore their warfare pins like badges of honor. None of them looked in her direction. A metallic clatter erupted from the serving line. Someone had dropped a tray. The sound echoed through the space like a gunshot. Bryony's body tensed. Her hand moved instinctively toward her hip, where nothing was holstered. She caught herself mid-motion and forced her fingers to relax. The reaction had taken less than a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but someone had. A young SEAL lieutenant stood near the beverage station. He was watching her with narrowed eyes. His gaze moved from her face to her hand, then back again. Recognition flickered across his features, then uncertainty. He opened his mouth as if to speak. Bryony stood and cleared her tray. She walked past the lieutenant without making eye contact. Her movements were fluid, precise. She navigated around obstacles with the kind of spatial awareness that came from years of training. Too fluid, too precise. The lieutenant turned to watch her go. His hand reached for his phone, then hesitated. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway where she had disappeared. The supply warehouse occupied a sprawling concrete structure at the edge of the base. Inside, rows of metal shelving stretched toward the ceiling, packed with equipment and materials. The air smelled of cardboard and machine. Oil, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh white illumination. Bryony worked the inventory manifest with quiet efficiency. She scanned barcodes, checked quantities, verified lot numbers. The work was straightforward, repetitive, exactly what was expected of a logistics specialist. But the way she organized the supplies told a different story. She arranged equipment by operational priority rather than alphabetical order. Night vision batteries near the front. Medical supplies grouped by trauma classification. Communication gear stacked according to deployment frequency. The system made tactical sense. It made no sense for routine warehouse work. Petty Officer Drummond noticed. He was a heavy-set man with 15 years in logistics and opinions about everything. He walked over to where Bryony was reorganizing a shelf of radio equipment. "What are you doing?" His voice carried the particular irritation of someone whose system had been disrupted, making it more efficient. Bryony did not look up from her work. Efficient for what? We go alphabetical. That's the system. This way, critical items are accessible first. If there is an emergency mobilization, response time improves by approximately 40%. Drummond stared at her. When was the last emergency mobilization here? September 2019. That was 5 years ago. Correct. She finished securing a strap and moved to the next section. Drummond shook his head. You trying to play operator or something? You are logistics. We follow the system. Bryony said nothing. She continued working. Her hands moved with practiced precision, checking equipment with the kind of thoroughness that suggested intimate familiarity. She examined night vision battery expiration dates with intense focus, her fingers testing connections and seals. She knew exactly what to look for. She knew what failures looked like before they happened. Drummond watched her for another moment, then walked away muttering about new personnel who thought they knew better. At 1100 hours, Lieutenant Commander Webb arrived with a clipboard. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the permanent posture of someone who spent too much time behind a desk. "Hail," Bryony straightened. "Sir, you are being reassigned for the next 3 days. Parade ground detail. Admiral's inspection ceremony Friday." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I would prefer to remain on current assignment, sir." "Not a request. Admiral Thorne wants all hands for the ceremony. 5,000 personnel. Big show for visiting dignitaries." Webb handed her a packet of papers. "Report to parade ground at 0600 tomorrow for rehearsal. Uniform inspection at 1700 today." "Understood, sir." Webb turned to leave, then paused. Try to blend in, Hale. Just stand where they tell you and follow orders. Should be easy enough. After he left, Bryony stood holding the papers. Her fingers gripped the edges, hard enough to create small wrinkles in the pages. She forced herself to relax. The tremor in her left hand was barely visible. She made a fist until it stopped. Evening light filtered through the narrow window of her quarters. She sat on her bunk, staring at the footlocker. The combination lock gleamed dully in the fading sunlight. She had not opened it since morning, but her fingers moved automatically through the sequence. 3 turns right, 2 turns left, 1 turn right. The lock clicked open. The sealed envelope lay on top. She lifted it carefully. The paper felt fragile between her fingers. 6 months. She had carried it through 2 duty stations without breaking the seal. Her thumb traced the edges, feeling where the adhesive had yellowed with age. She set it aside. The brass compass was next. She turned it in the light, watching shadows play across the filed surface. The date on the back seemed to glow in the dimness. Halo 7/14, March 2021, 4 years ago. A lifetime. She pressed the compass against her chest and closed her eyes. The memory came in fragments. Helicopter interior. Red light washing everything in crimson. Someone screaming orders over the rotor noise. Water. So much water. The cold hitting like a physical blow. Radio chatter fragmenting into static. Then her own voice, distant and distorted. I am going back for them. Her eyes snapped open. She was breathing harder than she should be. 4 counts in. 4 counts out. 4 counts hold. The combat breathing technique steadied her pulse within 30 seconds. She returned the compass to the footlocker, but kept the envelope in her hands. Her fingers worked at the edge of the seal. The adhesive resisted. She could tear it open, read whatever was inside. No. Instead, she placed it back in the footlocker. Not tonight, maybe not ever. The dive watch remained hidden in its sock. She did not retrieve it. She locked the footlocker and spun the dial. Her logbook sat on the small desk beneath a window. She opened it to a clean page and wrote in precise military shorthand, 3 days, then gone. The ink was black. The letters perfectly formed. She closed the book and placed it exactly parallel to the edge of the desk. The knock came at 2100 hours. Bryony froze. Her body tensed, hand moving instinctively to where a sidearm would be holstered. There was nothing there. Civilian quarters. No weapon. She exhaled slowly and forced her hand back to her side. The knock came again. 3 sharp raps. She opened the door. Drummond stood in the corridor, holding a can of energy drink. You coming to the brief tomorrow? His tone was casual, almost friendly. The irritation from earlier had faded. Yes. Good. Thorne is a hard case, real old-school SEAL. Expect him to make examples of people. Just keep your head down and you will be fine. Understood. Drummond took a long drink. You former military or something? Before logistics? No. You just seem like you have done this before. The way you move, the way you check equipment. Reminds me of the operator types. Bryony's expression remained neutral. I follow procedure. Right? Drummond did not sound convinced. Well, good luck Friday. Try not to get noticed. Thorne eats people for breakfast when he is in a mood. After he left, Bryony closed the door and leaned against it. She stayed there for a full minute, listening to the silence. Then she removed the bandage from her ear. The scar tissue was extensive. It followed the curve of her outer ear and disappeared into her hairline. The damage was old but permanent. She tested her hearing the way she did every night. Right ear sharp. Every sound clear and distinct. Left ear significantly impaired. Voices became muffled. High frequencies disappeared entirely. She could compensate in most situations, but in chaos, in noise, in the confusion of crisis, the deficit could be fatal. She rewrapped the bandage with mechanical precision and prepared for sleep. The parade ground stretched across 10 acres of flat asphalt. At 0600, it was already filling with personnel, thousands of sailors and Marines assembling in formation. The early morning air was cool, but the forecast called for temperatures above 90 degrees by afternoon. The ceremony was scheduled for 1000 hours Friday. 2 full days of rehearsal remained. Bryony stood in the logistics corps section, rear left quadrant, Around her, personnel adjusted their spacing and checked their uniforms. Conversations hummed through the ranks. She remained silent, eyes forward, hands at her sides. But her gaze was never still. She tracked movement patterns across the formation, noted the positions of senior officers, identified exits and covered positions, calculated distances and angles. Her mind worked through tactical assessments automatically, processing information faster than conscious thought. Her spacing was perfect, her bearing was textbook, but the way she stood revealed something underneath the logistics specialist facade. Her weight distributed precisely for maximum stability, her posture allowing for immediate movement in any direction, her head position providing optimal field of view while appearing to look straight ahead. A command voice cut through the morning air. "Formation! Attention!" 5,000 personnel snapped to attention as one. The sound was like thunder rolling across the asphalt. Admiral Thorne arrived in a staff car. He emerged in full-service dress uniform, chest heavy with ribbons and warfare devices. He was 53 years old, built like he still ran obstacle courses for recreation. His reputation preceded him. 26 years as a SEAL. Multiple combat deployments. Known for excellence and zero tolerance for anything less. He took the podium with the confidence of someone who had commanded in worse conditions than a parade ground. "Standards," his voice carried without amplification. "That is what separates us from everyone else. Standards in appearance, standards in performance, standards in discipline. If you cannot meet the standard here, in peace, on American soil, then you do not belong in this uniform." He paused, letting the words settle. "Friday, we will conduct this ceremony flawlessly. There will be no excuses, no failures, no weakness. Every one of you will represent the finest military in the world, or you will be removed." The formation remained frozen, silent. Thorne stepped down from the podium and began walking through the ranks. His executive officer, Commander Vasquez, followed at a respectful distance. Vasquez was younger, mid-40s, with the cautious demeanor of someone who knew his commander's moods. Thorne stopped in front of a Marine corporal in the third row. "Your cover is crooked." "Sir?" "Yes, sir." "Fix it, now." The Marine adjusted his cover with shaking hands. Thorne moved on. He corrected a sailor's ribbon placement, criticized another's posture, made a third recite general orders from memory. Each correction was public, sharp, designed to establish dominance. Bryony watched from the rear. She did not move, did not react. But her eyes tracked every motion, every word, every shift in the power dynamic unfolding before her. Thorne never made it to the logistics section that day. After 90 minutes, he dismissed the formation, with orders to return the next morning at 05:30. Breakfast would be optional. Perfection would be mandatory. As personnel dispersed, Lieutenant Garrick approached from the front formation. He was the same SEAL who had watched her in the mess hall. Mid-20s, athletic build, the kind of confidence that came from elite training. He stopped 3 feet from Bryony. "I know you from somewhere." She met his eyes for the first time. There was something in her gaze that made him take an involuntary half-step back. Not fear, something deeper. Recognition of something he did not fully understand. "No, sir, you do not. I swear I have seen you before. Your face, the way you move. I have never served in special operations, if that is what you are asking." "That is not what I said." Bryony held his gaze for another second, then turned and walked away. Her movements were fluid, economical. She navigated through the dispersing crowd with the kind of spatial awareness that came from years of training. Too fluid, too economical. Garrick pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the search bar. He started to type something, then stopped. Uncertainty crossed his features. He looked up, watching Bryony disappear into the crowd. Then he put his phone away and walked in the opposite direction. The heat built through the afternoon. By 1700 hours, the asphalt radiated warmth like a griddle. Bryony returned to the warehouse to complete her shift. Drummond was gone. She worked alone, organizing supplies and updating manifests. At 1900 hours, she was checking a shipment of medical equipment when her hands froze. A box of combat gauze. Standard issue for battlefield trauma. She lifted it carefully, examining the packaging. Her fingers traced the instructions printed on the side. Application, pressure, packing technique, words she knew by heart, words that brought memories she could not suppress. She set the box down with excessive care and stepped back. Her breathing had become shallow. She forced herself to return to the combat breathing pattern. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. A voice behind her made her turn. "You okay?" It was Webb, the supply officer. He stood in the warehouse entrance, briefcase in hand. "Yes, sir. Just completing inventory." "At 1900 hours?" He checked his watch. "Your shift ended 2 hours ago. I wanted to finish the medical supplies section." Webb studied her for a moment. "You do good work, Hale. Thorough. Maybe too thorough for someone who is only here temporarily. Where are you? Headed after this rotation?" "Not sure yet, sir." "Medical reintegration program, right? That is what your file says. What happened? Training injury, hearing loss?" "Must have been some training." He said it carefully, watching her reaction. Bryony offered nothing. Her expression remained neutral. Webb nodded slowly. "Well, finish up and get some rest. Big day Friday. Try not to get noticed by Thorne. He has a talent for finding weak points." After he left, Bryony stood alone in the warehouse. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of cardboard and oil filled her lungs. She looked at the box of combat gauze sitting on the shelf. Then she turned and walked out. The night before the ceremony, sleep would not come. Bryony lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the base was quiet except for the distant sound of helicopters conducting night operations. The rhythmic thump of rotors carried through the walls. She sat up at 2300 hours and opened her footlocker. The compass came out first. She turned it in her hands, feeling the weight of it. The tarnished brass caught the moonlight from the window. She traced the date engraved on the back. Halo, 7/14, March 2021. 4 years. Long enough for most people to move on, not long enough to forget. She placed the compass on her chest and closed her eyes. The memory came sharper this time, more complete. Helicopter interior, red light. She was younger, wearing full tactical gear, the weight of equipment familiar and comforting. Someone was screaming into the radio. Water was rushing in through a breach. The aircraft was going down, altitude dropping. They had maybe 30 seconds before impact. Her own voice cut through the chaos, clear, authoritative. "I am going back for them. Mark my position. Do not follow." Then water, so much water, cold enough to stop her heart, pressure crushing her chest. Darkness absolute. She opened her eyes. She was breathing hard. Sweat covered her forehead. Despite the cool air, she sat up, pressing the compass against her chest until her heart rate steadied. The sealed envelope was next. She lifted it from the footlocker and held it in both hands. 6 months. 2 duty stations. Never opened. Her thumbs worked at the edge of the seal. The adhesive was old. It would tear easily. She applied pressure. The paper began to give. Another second and it would open. She stopped, placed the envelope back in the footlocker, closed the lid, spun the lock. Not tonight. The distant sound of helicopters grew louder. She stood and moved to the window. 2 aircraft crossed the night sky, their navigation lights blinking in the darkness. The rotor wash carried across the base. She watched until they disappeared beyond the horizon. Her hands were trembling. She made fists until the tremor stopped. At 23:45, she pulled out her civilian phone, not the military-issued device that sat on her desk. A different phone, older, encrypted. She powered it on and waited for it to boot. 1 contact in the address book, no name, just a number. She typed carefully. Still holding position. 36 hours. Her thumb hovered over the send button. She read the message 3 times, then she pressed send. The message disappeared into the encrypted network. No confirmation, no response expected, just information transmitted into the void. She powered off the phone and returned it to its hiding place beneath a loose board under her bunk. Then she lay back down, staring at the ceiling. The helicopters returned. The sound of rotors filled the room. She closed her eyes and tried to control her breathing. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. At 0400, she gave up on sleep. She rose and began her morning routine. Same as always. Precise, controlled, predictable. Tomorrow was the ceremony. Tomorrow, Admiral Thorne would inspect 5,000 personnel under brutal heat. Tomorrow, she would stand in the back ranks and try to remain invisible. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, she wrapped her damaged ear with careful precision. She touched the compass one more time. She did not open the envelope. She locked the watch away in its hiding place. And she prepared for what was coming, even though she could not yet see its shape. Outside, dawn approached. The sky lightened from black to deep blue. Somewhere on the base, other personnel were waking, preparing, practicing, getting ready for the biggest ceremony of the year. Bryony Hale stood at her window, watching the sunrise. Her reflection in the glass showed a logistics specialist. Unremarkable, temporary, anonymous. But her eyes told a different story. They held the weight of 4 years, the memory of cold water and darkness, the knowledge of what she had been and what she had lost. She touched her damaged ear through the bandage. The scar tissue beneath her fingers was a permanent reminder. Tomorrow would bring heat and scrutiny, and 5,000 witnesses. Tomorrow would bring Admiral Thorne and his zero tolerance for weakness. Tomorrow would reveal whether invisibility could survive inspection. She turned from the window and finished her preparations. The routine was comfort. The precision was control. The silence was safety. For 36 more hours. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to honor those who serve in silence. Have you ever witnessed someone reveal strength that no one expected? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The parade ground was already filling when Bryony arrived at 0530. Dawn had not yet broken fully, but floodlights illuminated the massive expanse of asphalt with harsh white light. Thousands of personnel moved into position like pieces on a vast chessboard. Sailors in dress whites, Marines in blues, officers in service uniforms with ribbons catching the artificial brightness. The scale was overwhelming. Bryony found her position in the logistics, corpse section, rear left quadrant. Around her, personnel adjusted spacing and checked uniforms one final time. The air smelled of pressed fabric and boot polish. Conversations hummed through the ranks in low voices. She remained silent, eyes forward, hands at parade rest. But her gaze was never still. She tracked movement patterns across the formation, senior officers assembling near the reviewing platform, medical personnel positioning themselves at strategic intervals along the perimeter, security forces maintaining standoff distances. Her mind processed tactical information automatically, exits northwest and southeast, covered positions behind the equipment trailers, wind direction favoring the western quadrants, clear sight lines to the platform from her position despite the distance. The spacing around her was textbook, every sailor exactly arm's length apart. But the way Bryony stood revealed something beneath the surface. Her weight distributed precisely for maximum stability, her posture allowing for immediate movement in any direction, her head position providing optimal field of view while appearing to look straight ahead. Old training that could not be completely suppressed. Lieutenant Garrick stood 3 rows ahead in the SEALs section. He kept glancing back toward the logistics corps. His expression was troubled. Twice he started to move, then stopped himself. Commander Vasquez noticed and spoke sharply. Garrick snapped his attention forward. The sky lightened from deep blue to pale gray. Heat was already building despite the early hour. The forecast had called for temperatures exceeding 95 degrees by midday. No shade existed on the parade ground. No relief. Just 10 acres of heat-absorbing asphalt and 5,000 bodies in wool uniforms. At 0600, a command voice cut through the morning air. Formation! Attention! The sound of 5,000 personnel snapping to attention rolled across the asphalt like thunder. Bryony's movements were precise. Textbook. But her breathing had shifted to the combat pattern. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Her body preparing for stress before her conscious mind acknowledged it. Admiral Thorne arrived at 0615. His staff car pulled up to the reviewing platform with deliberate ceremony. He emerged in full-service dress uniform, chest heavy with warfare devices and ribbons that represented 3 decades of service. His bearing radiated absolute authority. He moved like someone who had commanded in conditions far worse than a parade ground. Commander Vasquez followed at a respectful distance, carrying a clipboard and maintaining the careful posture of someone who knew his commander's moods intimately. Thorne took the platform. He did not use the microphone. His voice carried across the formation through sheer force of will and decades of command presence. This ceremony represents everything we stand for: excellence, discipline, standards without compromise. Today, dignitaries from allied nations will witness what American military precision looks like. They will see perfection, or they will see failures removed from ranks. There is no middle ground. He paused, letting the words settle like stones. If you cannot stand in formation under California sun, you have no business wearing this uniform. If you cannot follow simple commands under observation, you have no place in military service. If you are weak, if you are unprepared, if you are anything less than exceptional, step out now before I find you. No one moved. The formation remained frozen. Thorne stepped down from the platform. We will now conduct final inspection. All personnel will maintain attention. Medical personnel are authorized to extract casualties, but understand this: if you fall out, you will be documented. Weakness will be recorded. The inspection began. Thorne moved through the front ranks with surgical precision. He stopped in front of a Marine sergeant in the second row. The sergeant was built like he bench-pressed small vehicles. His uniform was immaculate. Thorne found fault anyway. Your ribbons are misaligned. Left side is 3 millimeters higher than right. Sir, yes, sir. The sergeant's voice was steady, but sweat was already forming on his forehead. 3 millimeters. In combat, 3 millimeters means the difference between hitting your target and killing a civilian. Details matter, Sergeant. Fix it. The sergeant made the adjustment with trembling hands. Thorne continued. He criticized a sailor's cover angle, made another recite the phonetic alphabet, questioned a third about their physical fitness test scores. Each interaction was public, sharp, designed to establish dominance and identify weakness. By 0700, the sun had risen fully. The temperature climbed past 80 degrees. The asphalt began radiating heat like a griddle. 5,000 bodies in wool uniforms. No movement, no relief, just endless standing under growing heat and scrutiny. Bryony felt sweat forming beneath her uniform. She controlled her breathing, maintaining the rhythm. Her left ear was already aching beneath the bandage. The damaged tissue did not dissipate heat well. She ignored it. Discomfort was familiar. Pain was manageable. Focus was everything. At 0745, the first sailor collapsed. He went down hard in the third row, hitting the asphalt with a sound that carried across the silence. Medical personnel moved immediately. 2 corpsmen loaded him onto a stretcher and carried him off the parade ground. The gap in the formation closed seamlessly. Thorne did not pause his inspection. He continued as if nothing had occurred. 15 minutes later, 2 more sailors fell. Then, a Marine. The medical personnel moved with practiced efficiency, extracting casualties and returning to their positions. The formation never broke. Personnel stood rigid despite the heat climbing past 85 degrees. Bryony's technical knowledge surfaced automatically. She assessed hydration status by observing skin tone and movement quality in personnel around her. She calculated heat injury progression based on environmental conditions and uniform weight. She identified early warning signs in 3 sailors within her line of sight, all information processed and categorized without conscious effort, old training that ran deeper than memory. Her hands remained perfectly still at her sides, but there was a micro tremor in her jaw muscle, the kind of tension that came from maintaining absolute control while systems beneath the surface operated at combat readiness. At 0830, Thorne reached the middle formations. He had been inspecting for over 2 hours. His uniform showed no signs of the heat. His voice remained sharp and clear. He made an example of a petty officer whose shoes were not polished to mirror brightness. He questioned a Marine corporal about the proper wear of service ribbons. He corrected postures and questioned qualifications. The formation was silent except for his voice and the occasional sound of another body hitting the asphalt. Lieutenant Garrick was sweating heavily. His SEAL training allowed him to maintain composure, but the heat was affecting everyone. When Thorne passed his row, Garrick executed a perfect salute. Thorne returned it without comment and moved on. But Garrick's eyes tracked back toward the logistics section, toward Bryony. She stood motionless. Her bearing was parade rest textbook, but her eyes were conducting constant surveillance, threat assessment, environmental monitoring. pattern recognition. The operator's mindset could not be fully suppressed no matter how hard she tried to blend into the background. At 0900, something shifted. A young sailor 2 rows ahead of Bryony began swaying. His movements were subtle but unmistakable, heat exhaustion progressing to heat stroke. His face had gone from red to pale. His breathing was shallow and rapid. He had maybe 90 seconds before he collapsed. Bryony's body tensed. Her hands moved slightly from parade rest position, not enough for anyone to notice unless they were watching closely. Her weight shifted forward onto the balls of her feet. Combat stance. Preparation for immediate action. She caught herself, forced her body back to parade rest. This was not her mission. She was logistics, temporary, anonymous, not her responsibility. The sailor collapsed 30 seconds later. He went down sideways, striking the asphalt hard. Medical personnel moved immediately, but the sailor was seizing. The corpsman worked quickly, rolling him into recovery position and calling for additional support. Bryony's jaw tightened. She had known. She had seen it coming. She could have prevented it, but intervention would have drawn attention, would have revealed knowledge that did not fit her cover. Old instincts warring with current mission parameters. She maintained her position, silent, still, but something had changed in her eyes. At 0930, Thorne reached the rear formations. The temperature had climbed past 90 degrees. The sun was relentless. Heat radiated from the asphalt in visible waves. Personnel were dropping at a rate of 1 every 10 minutes. The medical staff was overwhelmed but maintaining professional composure. Thorne seemed energized by the conditions. He moved through the ranks with predatory focus, looking for weakness, seeking easy targets to demonstrate his authority. He reached the logistics corps section at 0945. Bryony stood in the 4th row, unremarkable among dozens of similar faces. Her uniform was perfect. Her posture was textbook. But something about her caught Thorne's attention. Maybe the way she stood, maybe the intensity in her eyes despite the heat, maybe just proximity and bad timing. He stopped in front of her. "State your rate and assignment." Bryony's voice was clear despite the damaged ear and the heat. "Logistics, Specialist 2nd Class. Temporary assignment from Medical Reintegration Program, sir." "Medical reintegration?" Thorne said the words with visible contempt. "What happened? Could not handle the real Navy?" "Hearing damage, sir. Training injury." Thorne leaned closer. His face was inches from hers. "Training injury. Let me guess. Tripped during a drill. Hurt your delicate ear. Now you hide in supply warehouses pretending to serve." Bryony said nothing, eyes forward, hands at sides. "I asked you a question, Specialist." "The injury occurred during advanced combat life-saving training, sir. Inner ear damage from blast overpressure." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Advanced combat life-saving. That is medic training. Since when do logistics specialists attend medic courses?" "Cross-training program, sir." "Cross-training." He circled her slowly, looking for additional faults. Her uniform was immaculate. Her bearing was perfect. He found nothing visible to criticize. That seemed to irritate him. Further, he stopped directly on her left side, the damaged side. "If your hearing is compromised, you do not belong in this formation. You do not belong in uniform. You are dead weight." Bryony's hands clenched briefly, then relaxed. A tell that lasted less than a second. Thorne noticed. "Did you just react to my assessment, Specialist?" "No, sir." "No?" He leaned in, speaking directly into her damaged left ear. His voice was parade ground volume, designed to carry, but directed into the ear that could not process it clearly. "Then you will have no problem following my next order. When I give the command, you will execute an about-face and sound off with your full service record. Is that clear?" The words reached Bryony's damaged ear as distorted noise. Consonants blurred, keywords lost in the acoustic damage. She caught maybe 60% of the command, not enough to be certain. She hesitated. 2 seconds, maybe 3, trying to process incomplete information, trying to respond, appropriately without asking for clarification, trying to remain invisible. Thorne's face darkened. "Did you just refuse a direct order?" "No, sir, I did not clearly hear." "Excuses." His voice cut across her explanation. "Weakness masquerading as limitation. You stand here taking up space while real sailors serve. You represent everything wrong with lowered standards. You are a disgrace to this uniform." The The formation had gone completely silent, 5,000 personnel frozen, watching. Bryony remained at attention. Her jaw was set, her hands steady. But something had shifted in her eyes, something dangerous and controlled, rising from depths she had kept carefully buried. Thorne saw it. It enraged him. "You do not even have the decency to show respect. You stand there with defiance in your eyes. Let me teach you something about military bearing." He struck her, open-handed, across the face. The sound echoed across the parade ground like a rifle shot. Absolute silence followed. 5,000 personnel frozen in shock. No one moved. No one breathed. The formation was a photograph. A moment suspended in disbelief. Bryony's head had turned from the impact. For 3 full seconds, she did not move. Blood traced a thin line from her lip where Thorne's ring had connected. The right side of her face was already reddening. Then, slowly, she straightened. Her movements were controlled, precise. She brought her head back to center, eyes forward, hands at her sides. No emotion visible on her face despite the blood, despite the pain, despite 5,000 witnesses to her humiliation. Thorne leaned in close. "That is military bearing. That is discipline. You will stand there and accept correction because you are nothing. Dead weight, a waste of resources. If I had my way, you would be separated today." Bryony's breathing remained controlled. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Combat breathing, maintaining her composure when everything inside her wanted to react. She spoke. Her voice was quiet but absolutely clear. It cut through the silence like a blade. "Permission to retrieve my personnel file, sir." The request was so unexpected that Thorne actually stepped back. His expression shifted from anger to confusion to contempt in rapid succession. "Your personnel file?" He laughed. The sound was harsh and mocking. "You think paperwork will save you? You think some documentation will erase what just happened? Permission to retrieve my sealed personnel file, sir." "Sealed?" Thorne looked at Commander Vasquez. "What is she talking about?" Vasquez checked his clipboard. "Some medical reintegration cases have restricted files. Privacy protocols, sir." Thorne turned back to Bryony. His smile was cruel. "Fine, go ahead. Bring your participation trophy resume. Show everyone your collection of excuses. This should be entertaining." Bryony rendered a salute. The movement was textbook perfect, crisp, controlled, held for exactly the prescribed duration. No hesitation, no weakness. The salute of someone who had done it 10,000 times under every condition imaginable. Thorne returned it with visible irritation. Bryony executed an about-face with parade ground precision. Then she began walking toward the command tent. And everything changed. The walk was different, fundamentally, unmistakably different. The awkward logistics specialist was gone. This was an operator's movement, confident, purposeful, each step covering ground with mechanical efficiency. Her weight distribution shifted, her head position elevated slightly, her spatial awareness evident in how she navigated the space. She was not walking across a parade ground. She was moving through a tactical environment with absolute command presence. 5,000 pairs of eyes followed her. The formation remained frozen, but attention had shifted. Personnel were watching something they could not quite identify, but instinctively recognized. Lieutenant Garrick's face had gone pale. He was staring at Bryony's walk, at the way she moved. His mouth opened slightly. Recognition was dawning across his features. "Oh, God," he whispered. "I know who that is." The SEAL next to him glanced over. "What? That is not a logistics specialist." Commander Vasquez was watching Bryony's movement with growing concern. He leaned toward Thorne. "Admiral, the way she just moved, that is not standard personnel. That is operator cadence." Thorne waved him off, supremely confident. "She is nothing. Probably walked differently because I rattled her. She will come back with some sob story about training injuries and expect sympathy. Watch." But Vasquez was not convinced. Something about the situation was activating instincts honed over decades of military service. Something was very wrong with the narrative they had been given. Bryony reached the command tent. She paused at the entrance. Her hand rested on the tent flap. She stood there for 3 seconds, head slightly bowed. Then her shoulders straightened. Her posture shifted into something sharper, more angular, more dangerous. She entered the tent. Inside, 2 administrative personnel were working at field desks. They looked up as she entered. One was a petty officer first class. The other was a staff sergeant. Both had been processing paperwork for the ceremony. Bryony's voice was different now, harder, more authoritative. "I need my sealed personnel file. Authorization code Delta 7 Zulu." The petty officer blinked. "Ma'am, that is a special operations classification code. We would need proper authorization from—" "I am providing the authorization, Delta 7 Zulu. Verify it now." Something in her tone made the petty officer move immediately. He accessed the secure database on his computer. His fingers typed the code. The screen changed. His eyes widened as he read what appeared. "Staff Sergeant, we need the red stripe safe." The staff sergeant looked up from his work. "The what?" "Red stripe safe, now." They moved to a locked cabinet in the corner of the tent. Inside was a smaller safe with red diagonal stripes across its face. The staff sergeant entered a combination. The lock clicked open. Inside were 3 sealed folders. The petty officer checked designations and pulled one out. The folder was manila, but its edges were marked with red diagonal stripes. Multiple classification stamps covered the surface. Secret, no foreign, special access required. The stamps were layered like archaeological strata, each representing a different level of restricted information. The petty officer handed it to Bryony with both hands, the way someone might hand over something fragile or dangerous. "Ma'am, this file requires special handling protocols. Are you certain?" "I am certain." Bryony held the folder. Her hands were steady, but she took one long breath before turning back toward the tent entrance. The weight of the folder was minimal. The weight of what it represented was crushing. She had kept this, buried for 4 years, hidden behind medical separation and bureaucratic language and careful anonymity. Now she was about to expose everything, about to reveal truths that would destroy the invisibility she had worked so hard to maintain. But Thorne had given her no choice. She stood at the tent entrance. Through the opening, she could see the parade ground. 5,000 personnel still frozen in formation. Admiral Thorne standing near the reviewing platform, arms crossed, wearing the smug expression of someone certain of his righteousness. Bryony closed her eyes, took another breath. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. When she opened her eyes, something fundamental had shifted. The operator was fully present now. The logistics specialist facade was gone. She emerged from the tent carrying the folder with one hand. Her bearing had transformed completely. This was command presence, authority that radiated from posture and movement and absolute certainty. She walked back across the parade ground. The formation watched in silence. This time, everyone noticed the difference, the confidence, the precision, the way she moved through space like she owned it. This was not the same person who had been struck minutes earlier. This was someone else entirely. Garrick's whisper carried through the SEAL section. "That is Hale, Lieutenant Commander Bryony Hale. She was Halo 7. The SEAL next to him froze. Halo 7? The Morocco extraction? That was 4 years ago. That whole team was... She survived. They buried her identity after medical separation. Oh my God, Thorne just struck Bryony Hale. The realization was beginning to spread. Whispers moving through the front formations like ripples across water. Personnel who knew, who had heard stories, who understood what Halo 7 meant. Commander Vasquez heard the whispers. His face went pale. He grabbed Thorne's arm. "Admiral, I think we need to..." Thorne shook him off. "Let her come. Whatever sob story she has prepared will not change what happened." Bryony approached the reviewing platform. She stopped precisely 3 paces away, rendered another perfect salute, held it. Thorne returned it with barely concealed irritation. "My personnel file, as requested, sir." She placed the folder on the podium. The red diagonal stripes were clearly visible. The classification stamps caught the sunlight. Multiple senior officers standing nearby could see the markings. Their expressions began to change. Thorne reached for the folder with dismissive confidence. He opened it. His hand froze on the first page. Bryony stepped back, executed another textbook salute. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes held something that might have been satisfaction, or might have been resignation, or might have been both. Thorne's face drained of color. He flipped to the second page, then the third. His hands began to shake. Commander Vasquez leaned over, started reading. His body went rigid. He physically stepped backward, hand moving too, his chest as if he had been struck. The folder passed between senior officers. Each one who read it had the same reaction: shock, recognition, horror at what had just occurred. Garrick had broken formation. He was moving forward despite protocol. "Sir, that woman is Lieutenant Commander Bryony Hale. She earned the Navy Cross during Halo 7. She saved 12 operators at the cost of catastrophic injuries. She was recommended for the Medal of Honor, but it was classified for operational security. Sir, you need to—" Thorne was still reading. His lips had gone white. The folder shook in his hands. The silence across the parade ground was absolute. 5,000 personnel watching, waiting, the heat forgotten, the ceremony forgotten. Everything focused on the man reading the folder and the woman standing 3 paces away, with blood still tracing her lip. Finally, Thorne looked up. He met Bryony's eyes. She held his gaze without flinching, without emotion, just steady, calm, waiting. Thorne's mouth opened. No words came out. Commander Vasquez's voice was barely a whisper. "Admiral, you need to render honors, now." The formation was silent. The world was silent. Everything had compressed down to this moment, this recognition, this reckoning. Bryony remained at attention, her damaged ear hidden beneath the bandage, her scarred tissue concealed beneath the uniform. But the evidence of who she was and what she had done lay open on the podium for everyone to see. The operator revealed. The truth surfaced. The silence broken. And Admiral Thorne standing there with the folder in his hands, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. If you have ever witnessed someone reveal strength that changed everything, please share your story in the comments. Consider subscribing to honor those whose service remains hidden until the moment demands otherwise. Commander Vasquez rendered the first salute. His movement was rigid, formal, the kind of salute reserved for officers, of exceptional distinction. His hand snapped to his forehead and held there, unwavering, directed at the logistics specialist standing 3 paces from the reviewing platform, with blood still tracing her lip. Bryony returned it. Crisp. Textbook. Her face remained expressionless. The Master Chief standing beside Vasquez saw the exchange. He stepped forward, reading the folder over the commander's shoulder. His weathered face transformed from confusion to recognition to something approaching awe. His eyes moved from the documents to Bryony's face, then back to the papers as if confirming what he was reading could possibly be real. He came to attention and rendered his own salute, sharp, immediate, held with absolute precision. The ripple effect began. A SEAL captain in the front formation had been listening to Garrick's whispered explanation. He knew the Halo 7 designation. He understood what it meant. The Morocco operation, the helicopter that went down in hostile waters, the extraction that saved 12 lives and became legend in special operations circles. He broke protocol, stepping forward from his position and rendering a salute from 30 yards away. The gesture was unmistakable even at distance. Then another SEAL, then 3 more, then an entire row. The salute spread through the front formations like a wave moving across water. One person recognizing, then explaining to the next, then the next. The whispers carried across the parade ground in fragments. Halo 7, Morocco. Extraction under fire, 12 saved. She survived. That is her. Oh my God, that is Bryony Hale. Within 90 seconds, the entire front third of the formation was rendering honors to a logistics specialist standing on hot asphalt with a bleeding face and perfect military bearing. Admiral Thorne stood frozen. The folder shook in his hands. He looked at the salute spreading like wildfire through ranks that had been perfectly disciplined moments before, looked at Bryony standing, there with that same steady calm she had maintained throughout the entire confrontation. Looked back at the folder as if the words might have changed. His mouth worked, but no sound emerged. The color had drained completely from his face. The Master Chief's voice cut through the moment. It was quiet but carried absolute authority. Admiral Thorne, you will render appropriate honors, now. Thorne's hand trembled as he raised it. The salute was weak, uncertain. nothing like the crisp gesture of command he had displayed all morning, while criticizing and correcting and asserting dominance over 5,000 personnel. His hand reached his forehead and stayed there, shaking slightly. Bryony held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she returned the salute with the same textbook precision she had demonstrated throughout the entire encounter. No triumph in her expression, no satisfaction, no vindication visible in her features, just the steady calm of someone who had endured worse and survived, someone who had made peace with costs that most people could not imagine. She dropped the salute, executed an about-face with parade ground precision, began walking off the parade ground, the same operator's walk, confident, purposeful, each step covering ground with mechanical efficiency. But this time, everyone understood what they were seeing. This was not a logistics specialist trying to blend in. This was a decorated combat veteran with nothing left to hide. Someone who had led missions and made impossible decisions and paid prices that left permanent scars. Behind her, chaos erupted in controlled military fashion. Commander Vasquez was on his radio immediately. His voice was clipped and professional, but carried an undertone of urgency. "Command, this is Vasquez. Ceremony is halted. I repeat, ceremony is halted. Admiral Thorne is to report to the base commander immediately. All senior staff to Conference Room Alpha within 15 minutes. This is not a drill." The Master Chief stepped to the microphone. His voice carried across 5,000 personnel, still standing at attention in 90-degree heat, many of them confused about what they had just witnessed. "Formation is dismissed. All personnel return to duty stations. Senior NCOs ensure proper accountability. Medical personnel continue casualty extraction, move with purpose, and maintain discipline." The formation dissolved, but slowly. Personnel were not rushing away to escape the heat. They were watching Bryony's retreating form, watching the senior officers clustered around the reviewing platform in urgent conversation, watching Admiral Thorne standing there with the folder still in his hands, looking like someone who had just watched their career detonate in real time. Phone cameras had appeared despite regulations. The moment was being documented, recorded from multiple angles. Within hours, it would be everywhere, shared across social media, discussed in veteran forums, analyzed by military justice experts. The fastest fall from authority 5,000 witnesses had ever seen. Lieutenant Garrick broke into a jog, catching up to Bryony before she reached the edge of the parade ground. He fell into step beside her, matching her pace but maintaining a respectful distance. His uniform was soaked with sweat from standing in formation for hours, but he seemed not to notice. "Ma'am?" His voice was quiet, respectful, carrying the weight of recognition and regret. "I remember you now, Fort Benning, Officer Course. You were guest cadre for the breaching demonstration." Bryony did not slow her pace. Her eyes remained forward. "That was a long time ago. You taught us room clearing, advanced entry techniques. Someone asked about your deployment count. You said enough and moved on to the next demonstration. We thought you were just being intense. Standard operator refusing to talk about classified work. We had no idea what you had actually been through. You were not supposed to know." They walked in silence for several steps. The sound of their boots on asphalt was rhythmic and precise. Behind them, the parade ground was emptying, thousands of personnel dispersing to their various duty stations. But the atmosphere had changed. Something fundamental had shifted. Garrick seemed to be struggling with something. Finally, he spoke again. "I am sorry for not recognizing you sooner, for not stepping forward when Thorne struck you. I should have done something, said something, anything. You did exactly what protocol required. You maintained formation discipline under direct observation by senior command. That is what you were trained to do. Protocol." Garrick's voice carried frustration and self-recrimination. "Protocol says we honor those who serve. Protocol says we protect our people. I let you stand there and take that hit without saying a word. I watched a superior officer assault someone and did nothing." Bryony stopped walking. She turned to face him. For the first time that morning, genuine emotion broke through the careful control. Her voice was rough, carrying the weight of 4 years of careful anonymity being destroyed in 10 minutes. "You want to know why I did not want anyone to step forward? Because the moment someone intervened, my cover was broken. The moment anyone defended me, questions would be asked, my identity would surface, records would be pulled, and I would lose the only thing I had left, the ability to serve quietly, without recognition, without the weight of what I used to be following me everywhere. Garrick stood silent. Understanding was dawning across his features. His expression shifted from guilt to comprehension. I did not want to be Lieutenant Commander Hale anymore. I wanted to be Logistics Specialist Bryony, anonymous, useful, alive without being the ghost everyone remembered from Halo 7, without people looking at me and seeing only the mission, only the sacrifice, only the broken operator, who could not hack it anymore. She paused, her jaw tightening. But Thorne took that choice away. He forced my hand. And now, everything I spent 4 years building is gone. She resumed walking. Garrick did not follow. He stood there on the edge of the parade ground, watching her disappear around a building. His expression was troubled, thoughtful, the kind of look that suggested he was reconsidering everything he thought he knew about service and sacrifice, and what it meant to truly honor those who gave everything. Bryony's quarters were exactly as she had left them, small, Spartan, everything organized with military precision. The narrow bed made with hospital corners, the desk clear except for a closed logbook, the footlocker against the wall with its combination lock gleaming dully in the afternoon light filtering through the small window. She sat on the edge of her bunk and allowed herself 30 seconds of stillness, just sitting, breathing, processing. The uniform felt heavier than it should. The blood on her lip had dried, pulling the skin tight when she moved her mouth. Her face was swelling where Thorne's hand had connected. The right side throbbed in time with her pulse, but the physical pain was manageable. The emotional cost was harder to quantify. 4 years, 4 years of careful anonymity, 4 years of building a life that did not revolve around who she had been, 4 years of quiet service without the weight of recognition and expectation, and the endless questions about what happened and how she survived and what it felt like to lose everything. Gone in 10 minutes. She stood and moved to her footlocker. The combination lock opened with familiar clicks. 3 turns right, 2 turns left, 1 turn right. The mechanism released with a soft snick. She lifted the lid. Inside, the 3 objects waited. Compass, envelope, hidden watch. The trinity of her hidden past. Evidence of who she had been and what she had lost and why she had chosen invisibility. Over-acknowledgement. This time, she took them all out. The compass first. She turned it in the light, watching shadows play across the filed surface where initials had once been engraved. Someone else's compass. Given to her by someone who had not survived. She had filed away the initials because seeing them every day was unbearable, but she had kept the date on the back. Halo, 7/14th of March, 2021. The date that had ended one life and begun another. The date that separated who she had been from who she became. She set it on the desk beside the window, positioning it carefully in a shaft of afternoon sunlight. The envelope next. 6 months of forwarding stamps documenting its journey through military postal systems. 6 months of it sitting in her footlocker while she avoided opening it. 6 months of knowing what it probably contained, but being unable to face it. She held it for a long moment, feeling the weight of paper and ink and whatever words were contained inside. Her fingers traced the edges. The adhesive was old and yellowed. It would tear easily. Then she opened it. The letter was handwritten. Multiple pages in different scripts. Some she recognized immediately. Members of the platoon she had extracted from the submerged helicopter. The 12 she had saved at the cost of everything she had been. The first page was from Petty Officer Chen. His handwriting was careful, as if each word had been chosen with deliberate precision. "Ma'am, I do not know if you will ever read this. They told us your identity is sealed, that you requested anonymity as part of your medical separation. We respect that, but we needed you to know. You gave us our lives back. You went into that water when the bird went down, and you kept going back until all of us were out. You stayed when anyone else would have run. You paid a price none of us will ever fully understand. Thank you. Those words are not enough, but they are all we have." The second page was from Lieutenant Morrison. His script was messier, more emotional. "I remember the water. I remember the cold and the darkness, and thinking this is how it ends. Then your voice cut through the panic. Calm, clear, giving orders like we were running a standard drill instead of drowning in hostile territory. You organized us, you kept us focused. You went back for Rodriguez when his leg was trapped and we all thought he was gone. You saved him. You saved all of us. Your sacrifice will never be forgotten. Page after page. 12 voices, 12 perspectives on the same nightmare. 12 people alive because she had made a choice that cost her everything. The words blurred as she read. Her breathing became irregular. She forced herself to maintain the combat pattern. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. The technique steadied her pulse, but could not stop the tears that finally broke through years of carefully maintained control. The final page contained all 12 signatures, names written in different hands, but united in gratitude and acknowledgement and the understanding that what she had given them could never be repaid. We understand why you chose silence. We honor that choice. But know this, you are not alone. You were never alone. We remember. We carry you with us. Always. She folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling slightly. Then she placed it on the desk beside the compass. Evidence of service and sacrifice and survival. No longer hidden, no longer something to avoid. The dive watch came last. She unwrapped it from the sock where it had been hidden for 4 years. The metal was cold against her palm, heavy, real. Expensive tactical timepiece designed for depths most people would never see. She had worn it on every mission for 6 years. It had been on her wrist when the helicopter went down, when she went back into the water, when she pulled unconscious bodies through the darkness and cold. She turned it over. Coordinates were engraved on the back. 32.8597 degrees north, 6.9260 degrees west. The exact location where Halo 7 had gone into the water off the coast of Morocco, where she had made the choice that defined everything that followed, where Lieutenant Commander Bryony Hale had died, and something else had been born. She put the watch on her wrist for the first time in 4 years. The weight of it was strange after so long, unfamiliar but right. Like reclaiming a piece of herself she had thought lost forever. The metal warmed against her skin, adapting to her body temperature, becoming part of her again. A knock came at the door. Bryony did not flinch this time. She knew who it would be. She had been expecting this conversation since walking off the parade ground. She opened the door to find Commander Vasquez standing in the corridor, now accompanied by a 2-star Admiral Bryony did not recognize. The woman was in her 60s, gray-haired, with sharp eyes that suggested decades of experience making difficult decisions. She wore her own impressive collection of ribbons and warfare devices, a career that had likely included its own share of sacrifice and adaptation. "Commander Hale." Vasquez's voice was formal but respectful, carrying none of the dismissiveness that had characterized most interactions with logistics personnel that morning. "This is Admiral Kensington, base commander. She would like to speak with you." Kensington stepped forward. Her bearing was professional, but her eyes held something that might have been sympathy, or might have been understanding, or might have been recognition of shared experience. "May we come in?" Bryony stepped aside. They entered the small quarters. Kensington's gaze moved over the space, taking in the precise organization, the objects now displayed on the desk catching afternoon sunlight, the watch on Bryony's wrist that any operator would recognize as serious tactical gear. "I have just finished reviewing your complete service record." Kensington's voice was measured, carrying the weight of someone who had read, classified documents and understood their implications. The sealed portions, the classified operations, the medical separation documentation, the reintegration program parameters. "And I have just finished relieving Admiral Thorne of command pending full investigation into this morning's incident." Bryony said nothing. Her expression remained neutral, professional, waiting. "I want to be clear about something before we discuss what happens next." Kensington moved closer, her voice softening slightly. "You did nothing wrong. Your choice to maintain operational security about your identity was not only valid, it was your right under the reintegration program protocols. You were doing exactly what the program was designed to allow, living quietly, serving in a capacity that worked within your medical limitations, building a new life that did not revolve around your past service. That was entirely appropriate. Thank you, ma'am. Admiral Thorne will face appropriate consequences. The assault was witnessed by 5,000 personnel and documented by multiple recording devices, despite regulations prohibiting such documentation. The evidence is overwhelming. His career is over. That is not in question. Kensington paused, her expression becoming more serious. What is in question is what happens next for you. Bryony met the Admiral's eyes, steady, calm. Ma'am, your file indicates you were offered return to active duty with medical accommodations approximately 18 months ago. Full rank restoration, assignment to training command or operational planning, any number of positions that would utilize your experience and work within your physical limitations. You declined. The offer remains open. We can place you in a training role, command structure, operational planning, special operations liaison, any number of positions that would honor your service and utilize your considerable expertise. I appreciate that, ma'am, but my answer remains the same. Kensington studied her for a long moment. The silence stretched but was not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Finally, the Admiral spoke again. Can I ask why? You have dedicated your entire adult life to service. You have earned recognition and position that most people never achieve in full careers. You hold the Navy Cross. You saved 12 lives at extraordinary personal cost. You have operational knowledge and leadership experience that cannot be taught in any school. Why choose to remain in logistics? Why choose to stay invisible? Bryony looked at the objects on her desk. Compass, letter, watch, pieces of who she had been, evidence of what she had lost, symbols of what she had gained through loss and how she had chosen to rebuild. Because I am not the same person who earned those commendations. That operator died in the water off Morocco. The person who came back is someone different, someone quieter, someone who understands that there are many ways to serve, and that the most important, service is not always the most visible. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I have led missions and made decisions that cost lives and saved lives. I have operated at the highest levels of special warfare, and I have learned that kind of service has an expiration date, a point where the cost becomes unsustainable, where continuing means breaking in ways that cannot be repaired. Kensington nodded slowly, her expression showing understanding rather than judgment. Bryony continued. I reached that point 4 years ago. The water, the cold, the hearing loss, the spinal damage, the PTSD that makes helicopter sounds trigger responses I cannot fully control. Those are the visible costs. But the invisible costs were higher. The weight of command, the burden of decisions, the knowledge that every choice might mean someone does not come home. I cannot carry that anymore. I am not built for it anymore. So what are you built for now? Teaching, mentoring, helping the next generation? Be ready for what I was not ready for. Showing junior personnel that support operations matter as much as direct action. That there is honor in every role. That service takes many forms, and all of them are valuable. She gestured to the letter on her desk. Those 12 people are alive because I had the training and will to go back for them. But I had that training because someone taught me, someone mentored me, someone showed me what was possible. Now it is my turn to be that person for others. Kensington was quiet for several seconds. Then she nodded, decision made. Then you will continue in the reintegration program. But I am making some changes to your status and role. Your position becomes permanent rather than temporary assignment. Your role expands to include formal instruction responsibilities, leadership development for junior personnel, crisis management training, operational logistics planning, and your identity remains your choice to disclose or not. If you want to continue as logistics specialist Hale without reference to your past service, that is your prerogative. If you want to acknowledge your background when it serves a teaching purpose, that is also your choice. The control returns to you. Thank you, ma'am. However, there is one thing that is not optional. Kensington's voice became more formal. There will be an official recognition ceremony in 3 days. Small, controlled. We will be officially declassifying portions of your service record that were previously restricted for operational security. You will be acknowledged for your actions during Halo 7. The Navy Cross citation will be read publicly. This is necessary. The truth is already spreading through the ranks. Better to control the narrative with official acknowledgement than let speculation and rumor create distorted versions of what actually happened. Bryony's jaw tightened slightly, but she nodded. "Understood, ma'am." After they left, Bryony sat alone with the objects on, her desk and the watch warming on her wrist. The person she had been for 4 years was gone. The carefully constructed anonymity had been destroyed by 10 minutes of confrontation and revelation. But something else was emerging in its place. Not the operator she had been, not the invisible logistics specialist she had become. Something new, something integrated, something that acknowledged both past and present without being trapped by either. She opened her logbook to a fresh page and wrote in precise script, "Identity revealed, purpose unchanged, mission continues." The words looked strange on the page, simple, direct, but they felt true in a way that 4 years of hiding had not. She closed the book and sat watching the afternoon light shift across her quarters. Outside, the base continued its normal operations, helicopters conducting training flights, personnel moving between duty stations, the machinery of military service grinding forward regardless of individual drama. But something had changed, not just for her, for everyone who had witnessed what happened on the parade ground. They had seen authority abuse power. They had seen quiet strength withstand assault. They had seen truth surface despite years of careful concealment. Those lessons would ripple outward in ways she could not predict or control. All she could do was continue, adapt, integrate, serve in the ways she still could. The watch ticked steadily on her wrist, marking time, measuring the distance between who she had been and who she was becoming. 3 days later, the recognition ceremony took place in Admiral Kensington's conference room. Small, formal, controlled. A dozen senior officers present, representing various commands and warfare communities. No parade ground, no massive formations, no public spectacle. Just witnesses and documentation and the official acknowledgement of what had been hidden for 4 years. Bryony stood at attention in her Logistics Corps uniform. The same uniform she had worn on the parade ground. The same uniform Admiral Thorne had dismissed as evidence of dead weight. But now the senior officers in the room understood what that uniform concealed, what it represented, what it cost to wear it quietly after earning the right to wear so much more. Kensington stood at the head of the conference table, holding the official citation. Her voice was clear and formal as she began to read. The Secretary of the Navy takes pleasure in presenting the Navy Cross to Lieutenant Commander Bryony Hale, United States Navy, for services as set forth in the following citation: for extraordinary heroism during a classified direct action operation on 14 March 2021. Lieutenant Commander Hale demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership when her helicopter was struck by enemy fire and crashed into hostile waters off the coast of Morocco. Despite catastrophic damage to the aircraft and severe injuries to her own person, Lieutenant Commander, Hale immediately organized rescue operations for trapped personnel. When it became clear that extraction was impossible without additional support, she personally re-entered the submerged aircraft 3 times to retrieve incapacitated team members while under continued threat from enemy forces and worsening environmental conditions. Kensington paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Every officer in the room understood what 3 trips into a submerged aircraft in hostile territory meant. The cold, the darkness, the disorientation, the very real possibility of becoming trapped and drowning alongside those she was trying to save. The Admiral continued. Lieutenant Commander Hale's actions directly saved 12 lives at the cost of permanent hearing loss, spinal compression fractures, and extensive soft tissue damage requiring multiple surgical interventions and ongoing medical management. Her devotion to her teammates, her exceptional courage under the most difficult circumstances, and her unwavering commitment to mission success reflect great credit upon herself, the United States Naval Special Warfare Command, and the United States Naval Service. The officers present rendered honors. Bryony accepted them with the same steady calm she had maintained on the parade ground. No emotion visible, no triumph, just acknowledgement and acceptance. This was not celebration, it was documentation, making official what had been classified, acknowledging publicly what had been known only to a select few. After the formal ceremony concluded, the atmosphere relaxed slightly. Officers approached Bryony individually, offering respect and often sharing their own stories of sacrifice and adaptation. A SEAL commander who had lost both legs in Afghanistan but continued serving in training command. A surface warfare officer who had been medically retired after a shipboard accident but found new purpose in logistics planning. Others who understood that service did not end when the body could no longer perform at peak level. Kensington approached her privately after most of the others had left. "I know this is not what you wanted, the publicity, the attention, the loss of anonymity you worked so hard to maintain. But I need you to understand something. Stories like yours matter. They remind people what service actually looks like. Not the glory, not the ribbons, not the ceremonies, the sacrifice, the adaptation, the quiet continuation, the choosing to serve even after the cost becomes unbearable." "Yes, ma'am. You have students waiting, young sailors who signed up for logistics training and are about to discover their instructor is someone worth learning from. Not because of what you did 4 years ago, but because of what you chose to do after. That matters more than any medal." Kensington paused. "Go teach them what you have learned. Show them that service has many forms and all of them require courage." 1 month passed. Bryony's quarters changed gradually. The transformation was not dramatic, but was unmistakable to anyone who understood what they were seeing. The compass remained on her desk, but was now displayed openly, catching morning light through the window. The letter was professionally framed and mounted on the wall where she could see it when she woke. The watch stayed on her wrist, no longer hidden in a sock at the bottom of her footlocker. These objects that had been carefully concealed were now integrated into her daily life. New objects appeared alongside the old. A photograph of her first class of students, 8 young sailors standing outside the logistics training facility with genuine smiles. A commendation from a sailor she had mentored through a difficult personal crisis. A handwritten thank you note from someone she had helped transition from active duty to medical separation. Evidence of new purpose emerging from integrated past. Her routine changed too, but the foundational discipline remained. She still woke at 4:47, still wrapped her damaged ear with careful precision, still maintained the physical conditioning that had defined her adult life, even if she could no longer operate at special warfare levels. But now, she taught 3 times a week. Leadership seminars for junior personnel, supply chain management for operational environments, crisis response planning that drew on real-world experience. The students learned quickly that logistics specialist Hale was not standard instructor cadre. She taught with a kind of practical knowledge that only came from field experience. She demonstrated supply planning using scenarios that were clearly drawn from actual operations, even if she never explicitly stated that. She explained equipment maintenance using examples that revealed intimate familiarity with how gear failed under extreme conditions. She showed them how to think tactically about support operations in ways that transformed their understanding of their role. One morning after a particularly intense class on crisis logistics planning, a young female sailor approached her. The sailor was nervous, holding a folder against her chest like armor. Her name tape read, Garcia. She was maybe 20 years old, fresh from technical training. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "They say you were a SEAL, that you saved a whole platoon when a helicopter crashed, that you earned the Navy Cross and gave up everything to save people you could have left behind. Is that true?" Bryony studied the young woman, saw herself 10 years ago, saw the questions and uncertainty and desire to prove something, saw the weight of expectations and the pressure to be exceptional. "It is true, but that is not why I am here teaching you supply chain logistics." "Then why are you here? You could be commanding, leading missions, training operators. Why are you teaching us how to manage inventory?" "Because the people who do what I used to do depend on people who do what you are learning. Because support operations determine mission success as much as direct action. Because someone needs to teach the next generation that there is honor in every role, not just the ones that get publicized." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "And because I learned the hard way that you do not need to be on the front line to make a difference. Sometimes the most important service happens in the background. Sometimes the greatest impact comes from enabling others to succeed rather than seeking personal glory." The sailor nodded slowly, Some of the nervousness faded from her expression, replaced by thoughtful consideration. "Are you dealing with something specific?" Bryony asked, recognizing the signs of someone carrying a burden they had not yet articulated. "My family wanted me to go officer track, special warfare pipeline, but I tested better for logistics. My scores were highest in supply chain management and organizational planning. They were disappointed, said I was wasting my potential, that I should have pushed harder for combat roles. Let me tell you something." Bryony's voice was quiet but firm, carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "I spent 10 years trying to prove I belonged in special operations, pushing harder than anyone else, taking every difficult assignment, volunteering for every dangerous mission, ignoring my body when it needed rest, sacrificing relationships and health and balance because I thought proving myself to others was what mattered. And you know what I learned?" Garcia waited, her eyes fixed on Bryony's face. "Proving yourself to others is exhausting. Finding your purpose is freeing. If logistics is where your skills align, embrace it, master it, become exceptional at it. That is where you will make your greatest impact, not in trying to be something you are not, but in becoming the best version of what you actually are." Bryony gestured to the classroom around them. "Every operation that succeeds depends on hundreds of people doing their jobs perfectly. Most of them will never be recognized. Most of them will never earn medals or get their names mentioned in briefings. But without them, nothing works. The operators everyone celebrates would be dead or captured without the support structure that keeps them supplied, informed, and extracted when things go wrong. My family does not see it that way. Then your family does not understand how military operations actually function, and that is okay. They do not need to understand. You need to understand. You need to know your worth is not determined by how visible your service is, or how many people thank you for it. Your worth is determined by how well you do your job and how many people succeed because you did it right." Bryony paused. "The 12 people I pulled out of that helicopter are alive because I had the training and will to go back for them. But I had that training because logistics personnel ensured I had the right equipment, because support staff processed my training requests, because supply specialists kept my gear maintained, because communicators ensured we could call for help. Those people saved those 12 lives just as much as I did. They just did it from positions that do not get recognized." Garcia's eyes were bright. Understanding was replacing doubt. "Thank you, ma'am. That helps." "Good. Now go demonstrate that you belong here by excelling at what you do. Master these systems. Become the person others depend on. That is how you honor your potential." After she left, Bryony stood alone in the classroom. Sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating dust motes floating in the still air. The space smelled of whiteboard markers and industrial coffee, and the particular scent of military facilities everywhere. It was not a helicopter interior, not a tactical operations center, not a forward operating base in a conflict zone, not any of the environments where she had spent the first decade of her military service. But it was where she belonged now, and for the first time in 4 years, that felt like enough. 2 months after the parade ground incident, Bryony received an unexpected visitor. She was in her office completing evaluation reports when someone knocked on her open door. She looked up to find a man in his 30s, wearing civilian clothes but moving with the unmistakable bearing of military service. He was fit, cautious, carrying himself with the specific tension of someone who had seen combat and carried it forward into every space he entered. "Commander Hale?" His voice was respectful, uncertain. "Can I help you?" "My name is Rodriguez, Petty Officer First Class, retired. I was in the helicopter, Halo 7. You pulled me out when my leg was trapped in the wreckage." Bryony stood slowly. She had not seen any of the 12 since the operation, had not wanted to. The medical separation and identity burial had been designed specifically to prevent these connections. But now he was here, standing in her office doorway, looking at her with an expression that combined gratitude and guilt and relief. "I am glad you survived," she said simply. "I should have come sooner. We all should have. But they told us your identity was sealed, that you wanted privacy, that we should respect your choice to disappear." Rodriguez stepped into the office, moving carefully as if approaching something fragile. "Then I saw the video, from the parade ground. It is everywhere now. What that Admiral did, what you revealed. I realized you were not hiding anymore, so I came. Why? To thank you, to tell you that I think about that day every single day, That I have a daughter now who would not exist if you had not gone back for me. That my life continued because you made a choice that cost you everything. His voice broke slightly. And to tell you that we understand why you disappeared. We understand what you gave up. And we want you to know that it mattered, that it still matters, that we have not forgotten. Bryony was quiet for a long moment. Then she gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit, please. Rodriguez sat. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then he began to talk. About his life after Halo 7, about the surgeries to repair his leg, about meeting his wife during rehabilitation, about the daughter born 2 years later, about the career and logistics planning he had built after medical retirement, about the guilt of surviving when so many others had not, about the struggle to find purpose after losing the identity that had defined him. Bryony listened, recognizing her own story in his words, understanding that what she had given him was not just physical life, but the opportunity to discover who he was beyond the uniform and the missions and the operational tempo. When he finished, she spoke. You asked why I disappeared, why I chose anonymity over recognition. It was because I could not carry the weight of being the person who saved you, of being defined by one decision made in extreme circumstances, of having every interaction colored by people's knowledge of what I sacrificed. I needed to be someone new, someone whose value was not determined by past actions, but by present choices. And are you? Rodriguez asked. Someone new? I am becoming someone integrated, past and present existing together. The operator I was informs the instructor I am becoming. The sacrifice that ended my combat career enables me to teach others how to avoid the mistakes I made. The hearing loss that forced my separation gives me credibility when I talk to injured personnel about adaptation and continuation. She gestured to the objects on her desk: compass, letter, photographs. I am learning that hiding from the past does not heal it. Integration does. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The others want to meet, if you are willing. No pressure, no expectations. Just the 12 of us and you, acknowledging what happened and what continues because of it. Bryony considered. 4 years ago, she would have refused immediately. The weight would have been unbearable. But now, with her identity no longer hidden and her purpose rediscovered, the idea was less threatening, still difficult, still emotionally complex, but possible. Let me think about it, she said finally. I am not ready today, but maybe soon. That is all we can ask. Rodriguez stood, rendering a respectful salute before catching himself and offering a handshake instead. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. After he left, Bryony sat at her desk, staring at the letter on her wall. 12 signatures, 12 lives, 12 continuing stories that branched from one impossible choice made in cold water and darkness. She was beginning to understand that her service had not ended when the helicopter went down. It had transformed, changed shape, continued in ways she had not anticipated or initially accepted. But it had continued, and that mattered more than she had realized. On a cool morning in early November, Bryony returned to the parade ground. Early, before personnel began arriving for morning formations. The asphalt was empty, except for painted lines marking where thousands of sailors and Marines would eventually stand for various ceremonies and inspections. She walked to the exact spot where she had stood when Admiral Thorne struck her. The location held no power now. It was just asphalt and paint and morning air. But returning felt important. Closing a circle, acknowledging what had happened and what had changed because of it. Reclaiming the space where her carefully constructed anonymity had been destroyed and her true identity had surfaced despite 4 years of careful concealment. She stood there in the pre-dawn dimness, wearing civilian workout clothes, her damaged ear wrapped as always. The watch on her wrist caught the first light of approaching sunrise. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember. The heat, the formation, Thorne's voice, the strike, the blood, the walk to retrieve her file, the revelation spreading through 5,000 witnesses, the salutes, the recognition, the immediate destruction of everything she had built to protect herself, and the unexpected gift that had emerged from that destruction, the freedom to integrate rather than hide, the ability to acknowledge her past while building her future, the discovery that service took many forms and that teaching might be more valuable than operating. She was not alone for long. Footsteps approached across the asphalt, multiple people moving with military precision. She opened her eyes to find a group of young sailors approaching, her students, 8 of them. They moved with the careful respect of people who understood they were interrupting something private, but felt it was important anyway. "Ma'am," the speaker was Garcia, the young woman who had asked about her service weeks earlier. Her voice was quiet but carried determination. "We hoped we would find you here. We wanted to say thank you for the training, for the honesty, for showing us what service really means beyond the propaganda and the recruiting videos and the simplified narratives." Bryony looked at them, saw determination and uncertainty and potential, saw the future of support operations standing in front of her with genuine gratitude in their eyes, saw herself at their age, believing the only service that mattered was the most visible kind. "You do not need to thank me. Just take what you have learned and use it to support the people depending on you. That is all the thanks anyone needs." "Will you tell us about Halo 7? Another sailor asked. Not the official version, not the citation language. What it was really like, what you were thinking, how you made the choice to go back. Bryony was quiet for a long moment. The request was reasonable, but difficult. Talking about it meant reliving it, meant acknowledging emotions she had, spent 4 years trying to control. But these students deserved more than sanitized versions. They deserved truth. She spoke slowly, carefully, not the full story, not all the classified details that remained restricted, but enough. 3 months ago, I stood in this exact spot and no one knew who I was. That was intentional, carefully constructed. Invisibility was my mission requirement after medical separation. I thought disappearing was the only way to survive what had happened, the only way to continue serving without the weight of recognition and expectation and endless questions about the worst moment of my life. She gestured to the empty parade ground around them. But invisibility became my prison. I forgot that service without identity is survival, not purpose. I forgot that hiding from the past does not heal it. Integration does. I forgot that my story might help someone else survive their own. The students listened in silence. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When the helicopter went down, I had a choice: surface, save myself, report the loss, or go back into the water, into the darkness and cold, risk drowning alongside the people I was supposed to lead. That is the choice people focus on, the dramatic moment, the heroic decision. But that was the easy choice. Training made that choice almost automatic. You go back for your people, always, no matter the cost. She paused, her jaw tightening with memory. The hard choice came later, when I woke up in a hospital with permanent injuries, when I learned my hearing was destroyed, when I understood I would never operate again. The hard choice was deciding whether to accept medical separation or fight to remain in a role my body could no longer support. The hard choice was learning to serve in diminished capacity, learning to find value in teaching rather than doing, learning that I could still matter, even if I could never be what I was. Garcia spoke quietly. "How did you make that choice?" "I did not make it all at once. It took years, false starts, resistance, grief for who I had been, anger at what I lost. Eventually, I realized that service is not about maintaining the same role forever. It is about adapting, continuing, finding new ways to contribute when the old ways become impossible." She looked at each student in turn. "That is what I want you to understand. Your careers will change. Your roles will evolve. Your bodies will age and limit what you can do. That does not mean your service ends. It means it transforms. And sometimes the transformed version is more valuable than the original. True strength is not about being seen or celebrated or earning medals." Her voice carried quiet intensity. "It is about being steady when no one is watching, doing the right thing when recognition is impossible, and knowing your worth whether others acknowledge it or not." She paused. "But it is also about accepting when others offer honor, about letting people thank you for sacrifice, about understanding that your story might help someone else survive their own crisis. That is what I learned here, on this parade ground, when everything I spent 4 years hiding was exposed and I had to decide whether to run again or finally integrate." The students stood in respectful silence for several seconds. Then Garcia spoke again. "Thank you for trusting us with the truth, for showing us that service is more complicated than we thought. That strength takes different forms. That adaptation is not weakness. Remember that when you face your own impossibilities, when your body fails, or your circumstances change, or your role becomes something different than you planned, service continues, purpose adapts, value remains. You just have to be willing to transform. Commander Vasquez appeared at the edge of the parade ground. He approached with his characteristic careful respect, waiting until Bryony acknowledged him before speaking. "Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know the investigation concluded. Official findings were released this morning. Admiral Thorne has been officially retired. He will face no criminal charges, but his separation is permanent and the assault is documented in his service record. His retirement benefits are reduced due to conduct unbecoming. The Navy issued a formal statement acknowledging the incident and reaffirming commitment to accountability at all leadership levels. Thank you for the update. There is something else." Vasquez pulled an envelope from his jacket. He sent this, addressed to you personally. I read it first as part of security protocols. It is just a letter, no threat, no manipulation. If you want it, I have it. If you do not, I will dispose of it according to regulation. Bryony considered. Part of her wanted to refuse, to deny Thorne even the minimal acknowledgement of accepting his communication. But another part recognized that closure sometimes required facing uncomfortable truths. "I will take it." Vasquez handed over the envelope, then rendered a salute. Sharp, formal, the kind reserved for officers of exceptional distinction. "It has been an honor working with you, ma'am. Watching you teach these sailors, seeing how you have rebuilt, that matters more than anything that happened on this parade ground." She returned the salute, held it. Let him see the acknowledgement in her eyes, the recognition that his support had mattered, that standing with her when it was uncertain how the situation would resolve had required its own form of courage. After he left, Bryony dismissed her students and opened the envelope. The letter inside was brief, handwritten. The script was rough and uneven, as if written by someone unaccustomed to expressing difficult emotions, or perhaps someone whose hands shook while writing. "Commander Hale, I have no excuse for my actions. I struck you out of insecurity, anger, and the mistaken belief that authority justified abuse. I did not know who you were, but that is irrelevant. Your identity does not determine your right to dignity and respect. Your service does not excuse my failure to provide basic human decency. Your past does not justify my violence. I am deeply sorry for what I did. I understand no apology can repair the harm or restore what I destroyed. But I want you to know that your restraint taught me more about leadership than 30 years of command ever did. You stood there and absorbed my assault without retaliation. You retrieved your file with dignity. You revealed your identity not as a weapon, but as simple truth. You showed me what strength actually looks like, and in doing so, you demonstrated the failure of everything I thought I represented. Thank you for that final lesson. I only wish I had learned it without forcing you to pay the cost of my education. Rear Admiral Marcus Thorne, USN, retired. Bryony read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket. Forgiveness was complex. Acceptance was simpler. She accepted that he was sorry. She accepted that his career was over. She accepted that the moment on the parade ground had changed both of them permanently, and that some lessons could only be learned through failure and consequence. That was enough. She did not need to carry anger, did not need to nurture resentment. She could simply accept and move forward. Late afternoon sunlight filled her office on a day in mid-November. Bryony sat at her desk, completing evaluation reports for her students. The work was satisfying in ways combat operations had never been. Helping people develop was slower but more lasting than direct action. The impact was harder to measure, but potentially deeper. One good teacher could influence hundreds of students over a career. Those students would influence thousands of others. The ripple effect was impossible to quantify, but undeniably real. Her desk had evolved significantly over the months. The boss, photographs now occupied prominent positions in matching frames. The first, her in full SEAL gear, younger, standing with her platoon somewhere overseas. The faces were still redacted for security protocols, replaced with black rectangles that preserved anonymity while documenting the reality of the team. But the image captured who she had been, confident, capable, unbroken. someone who believed she could solve any problem through sufficient determination and skill. The second, recent photograph taken just last week with her current students, all 9 of them smiling genuinely, standing outside the logistics training facility after completing a particularly challenging exercise in crisis supply management. Her own smile was small but genuine, no longer forced or performative, just natural expression of satisfaction. This image captured who she had become: quieter, wiser, integrated. Someone who understood that influence came in many forms and that teaching might be more valuable than any mission she had ever led. Between the photographs sat the brass compass, the framed letter from the 12 she had saved, and a new addition, a small wooden plaque engraved with words from Admiral Kensington. Service transforms, but never ends. Thank you for showing us all what adaptation looks like. Objects no longer hidden, identity no longer buried, past and present existing together without conflict or compartmentalization. She completed the final evaluation and closed her laptop. Outside, the sun was setting over the base, painting the buildings in warm golden tones that softened the utilitarian military architecture. Somewhere in the distance, helicopters were conducting evening operations. The sound of rotors carried through the walls. She listened without flinching. The sound had become background again. Familiar, no longer triggering panic responses she could not control. Her hand rested between the 2 photographs. Old life, new life, the person she had been, and the person she was becoming. Both valid, both true, both part of the same continuous story that had been interrupted but never ended. A voice whispered from memory, her own voice from 4 years ago, distorted by water and radio static and mortal fear. I am going back for them. Mark my position. Do not follow. She had gone back. She had saved them. She had paid the price willingly and without hesitation, and she had survived to serve again in a different capacity. That was the real victory. Not the medals carefully stored in a locked drawer, not the recognition she had spent years avoiding, not the ceremony 3 months ago that officially acknowledged her sacrifice. The continuation. The refusal to let trauma define the ending. The choice to rebuild and keep serving even when the form of service changed completely and irrevocably. She stood and put on her jacket. The dive watch caught the golden light on her wrist, the metal warm from constant contact with her skin. She touched her, damaged ear through the bandage, not with pain, not with regret, with acceptance. This was the cost. This was the scar. This was the evidence of choice and sacrifice and survival. And it was okay. The injury did not diminish her value, did not limit her ability to contribute, just changed the form that contribution took. She walked to the door and paused, looked back at her desk one final time, past and present integrated in 2 photographs and 4 symbolic objects. The compass pointing toward purpose rather than dwelling on loss. The letter reminding her she was not alone and never had been. The watch marking the moment everything changed and simultaneously proving that time continued forward. The plaque acknowledging that transformation was not failure but evolution. Then she walked out into golden hour sunlight. The brightness enveloped her, warm and welcoming. She kept walking, purposeful and certain. Toward students who needed teaching, toward junior personnel who needed mentoring, toward purpose built on foundation of sacrifice, toward a future that honored the past without being trapped by it or defined by single moments of crisis. The silhouette of a woman walking into light, not running from darkness, not hiding from recognition, just moving forward with integrated identity and rediscovered purpose, continuing, adapting, serving. The image lingered as the sun set over Naval Air Station Coronado, over the parade ground where truth had surfaced and anonymity had been destroyed, over the quarters where identity had been hidden for 4 years, over the warehouse where she had tried to disappear into routine work, over the classrooms where purpose had been rediscovered, over all the spaces where transformation had occurred gradually and then suddenly. One person's story of invisible service and unexpected recognition. One moment of public reckoning that changed everything. One choice to integrate rather than hide. One continuing mission to help others find their own path through sacrifice and purpose and adaptation. The light faded slowly, twilight replacing golden hour, the base transitioned to evening operations, with the smooth efficiency of long-practiced routine. And somewhere in a small office filled with textbooks and training manuals and photographs bridging past and present, a logistics instructor turned, acknowledged veterans sat with students and taught them what strength actually looked like. Not the absence of breaking, the choice to rebuild and continue after breaking happened. Not the avoidance of cost, the willingness to pay it and keep serving afterward. Not the hiding from truth, the integration of truth into new identity that acknowledged both who you were and who you became through loss and adaptation. That was the real lesson. That was the truth worth sharing. That was the story worth remembering. Service transforms, but never truly ends. It just finds new forms, new expressions, new ways to contribute when the old ways become impossible. And sometimes those new forms are more valuable than what came before. Sometimes teaching matters more than doing. Sometimes influence through mentorship exceeds impact through direct action. Sometimes the quiet continuation after catastrophic loss demonstrates greater strength than any combat operation ever could. Have you ever known someone whose quiet strength changed your understanding of courage? Someone who served without needing recognition, but deserved it more than anyone. Someone who rebuilt after breaking and continued contributing in ways that mattered. Their stories matter deeply. Share your experience in the comments to honor those who serve in ways we are only beginning to understand. And if this story moved you, if it challenged your assumptions about strength and service and adaptation, please subscribe to remember that the most powerful service often happens in silence until the moment demands it be heard. Thank you for bearing witness to Bryony's story. Thank you for understanding that transformation is not failure. Thank you for honoring all those who serve quietly and continue serving even after the cost becomes unbearable.
I think what stayed with me most about this story was not the revelation itself, but the silence that came before it. That moment when 5,000 people watched something wrong happen and no one moved. I kept coming back to that, the heat, the formation, the absolute stillness. It made me uncomfortable in a way I could not shake. Because I think most of us, if we are honest, have been in that formation at some point. Maybe not on a parade ground, but somewhere. Watching something unfair happen and staying quiet because speaking up felt impossible or dangerous or just too complicated. There is one moment I cannot stop thinking about. It is not the strike. It is not even the folder being opened. It is the moment right after she straightened her spine and asked permission to retrieve her file. The way she did not argue, did not defend herself, did not try to explain who she was or what she had done. She just asked a simple question with complete calm. That composure under humiliation says something about a person that I think we do not talk about enough. Real strength is not loud. It does not need to announce itself. It just stands there and absorbs what it has to absorb and then takes the next right step without theatrics. This story is really about how we see people, how quickly we decide who matters and who does not. The Admiral saw a logistics specialist in the back ranks and assumed weakness, assumed she did not belong, assumed her silence meant she had nothing to say. And that assumption gave him permission to cross a line he never should have approached. But here is the thing about assumptions. They protect us from having to see people clearly. They let us simplify. They let us dismiss. And when those assumptions get shattered, the collapse is not just about being wrong. It is about realizing how badly we misjudged someone's entire humanity. Respect should never require proof. Dignity should never need to be earned through revelation, but we live in a world where people constantly have to prove they deserve basic decency, and that is exhausting. A lot of people watching this have lived some version of this moment. Maybe not in uniform, maybe not on a parade ground, but you have been underestimated. You have been dismissed. You have stood there while someone decided you were not worth their respect based on a glance, a title, a position, an assumption. And you had to choose, do I correct them? Do I reveal what they do not see? Or do I just let it go and keep moving? That choice is harder than people realize, because proving yourself should not be necessary. But sometimes staying silent costs even more. So I am curious, what moment in this story stayed with you the most? Was it the silence of the formation, the moment she walked back with the folder, the recognition spreading through the ranks? And here's a harder question. If you had been standing in that formation, watching it happen, what would you have done? I do not ask that to judge. I ask because I genuinely do not know what I would have done either. Being a bystander is complicated. Speaking up is risky. And sometimes we do not realize how much our silence costs until it is too late. If this story made you think, I would love to hear your perspective in the comments. Not about the story itself, but about the bigger questions it raises. About respect, about assumptions, about the people we overlook every single day. Thank you for watching.